We're at Real World Studios today, Peter Gabriel studio,
That's right.
for the recordproduction.com interview. And I'm delighted to have Mike Pela with me. I hope I'm pronouncing your name
That's
right.
right. That's very good. Yeah, not everybody does.
Well, it's funny because when I saw your name first on a sleeve probably when I was about 8 years old,
Right.
and thought it was Mike Pela, you see, because that's what you do when you're 8 years old.
Yeah.
But I'm wiser now that I'm 46.
No,
So-
I usually have to put people wise too. So well done. Yeah.
Where is that name from? Is it?
It's kind of Polish originally.
Is it?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think it was spelt differently, so
Yeah.
it's unusual.
It is unusual. I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever met another Pela.
No, there's a couple. There are the odd ones dotted around, but it's pretty
Yeah.
random name.
Yeah. But you grew up in London,
Yes,
did you?
grew up in London, and
And how did you get into studios?
well, I was always into music and bands in the '60s, and I had a tape recorder I used to mess around with.
Oh, right.
You know, from when I was about 11, with sound on sound and the overdubbing and just recording stuff off the radio, Luxembourg, that would
Yeah.
fade in and out, and then so I knew somebody that worked in the studio, and so eventually I just kind of did the rounds and applied, and then I got a job at CTS Studios up in Wembley,
Hmm.
and then
So they were in Dean Street as well at one stage.
they had a
didn't
dubbing place in Dean Street, which I think is still there, Delaney, yeah. So this is like another separate operation.
So you were always in Wembley.
I was always in Wembley,
which was the purpose-built.
which was,
complex.
yeah, and managed to survive until only a few years ago.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunately not there
No.
any longer. And so that was a great training ground. They had an orchestral room there. They did a lot of film sessions, a lot of orchestral sessions.
Yeah.
And then jingles, bands, all kinds of stuff. So it was a great place to learn, everything that went on.
Yeah. Were there any particular engineers there that you remember learning stuff from?
Well, there was a guy called John Richards who used to do all the film and classical. And I was just impressed because he was just really kept his cool and dealt with some tricky personality.
Right.
And he was always unruffled, and I thought that was, and diplomatic.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool, he would just, he would be very diplomatic with what he said back to them,
Yes.
the conductor.
Right.
And and Dick Plant, who was I
He
worked
was
on.
Mr. End almost, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the guy I sort of did a lot of assisting with. We worked on the ELO and Roy Wood. And later, I did a lot of work with Roy.
Yeah.
There, and no, I was going to say that one interesting thing in those days was that you would run tape. So the assistant would run the tape. You would drop the tracks in that recording. And in a way, you very quickly were at the heart of the session in the sense that you were, running. You had to kind of have a great sense of timing because you had to, of course, anticipate when to drop in and especially out.
Yeah.
You kind of had to get that right manually, So, that's something that then that changed. But they gave you a great sense of the speed and pacing of a session. And then with Roy Wood, we used to do these sort of baroque sort of pastiches almost of like Andrew's Sisters, Beach Boys, and he was a multi-instrumentalist, and we'd be like doing multi-harmony brass parts, and harmony parts, very speeding the tape, and so that we used to do these all-night sessions, and there was a great training ground for me to just try out anything.
Was he a bit of a megalomaniac then? Reputedly sort of a bit of a
No,
taskmaster?
He's
Or...
such a nice guy. He's
Yeah.
just like a real English eccentric.
Yeah.
He looks the same even now. And we would used to come in work 8 in the evenings, late in the morning.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're younger and you haven't really got any responsibilities, you can just, and you've got that drive, you can just work all the hours in the day, and did.
Yeah.
Learned a lot from those experiences.
Yeah. So when you're doing the film sessions, presumably you then learned how to mic up orchestras and
Miking out
all
orchestras,
that sort of stuff.
yeah.
And presumably those sessions were quite a bit of pressure because if they're being musicians, all however many you got, 50 musicians in the studio all getting paid whatever for a 3-hour session.
Yeah.
You can't accidentally wipe the
No,
table
exactly.
or
No.
punch in the wrong place, can you really?
No.
So
Definitely not. Yeah, you've got that responsibility. I think you'd also be chasing sync with they devised this 50 hertz pulse, and so you'd see it on the screen. So you'd be chasing the sync, very speeding slightly, the tape,
Oh, right.
watching, because they do it to picture.
yeah.
So you're doing that as well. So
Wow.
there was a lot a lot of responsibility in that sense.
So how does that work? So you're very speeding the tape to keep it in time
to
with
keep
the
it in
picture?
time with the picture, yeah.
Oh,
so
right.
It's very, very slight. You nothing to hear, because you're just within fractions of a 50 hertz pulse, so you're just kind of keeping it. It's like keeping it locked, really.
Yeah.
It's just like in the days before lock, SIM2 lock.
So what guided you? How do you know whether to speed up or slow
you can
down?
you can see the two waveforms.
Oh, I see.
The waveform on
Right.
the picture, and then the waveform that was printed on tape.
Oh, I see.
guess
So
it
you're
must
watching
be.
the.
So you're kind of watching the two, and you just very slightly. I guess it worked. It didn't have any. Yeah, it sounds unlikely now, doesn't it? But
It sounds. Yeah, it sounds.
I think it was
completely
there that they pioneered that. And then you got digital multi-track edits on
Yeah.
So you just kind of you do whatever was necessary.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
That was the way. That was your medium.
Yeah. So when you were working with ELO, then, how much Moog was there on the Eldorado?
There was there was Moog and there was some
It's a bit buried in the track.
Yeah, the low stuff and. That was the first album that I worked on. It was mainly assisting, but that was successful. And I remember thinking at the time, well, this is good. And then in fact it was successful. Like, okay, so I can see the path here from the recording right through to the public, And
there's quite a lot of big string sections and things.
Yes.
Presumably none of the actual band string members were playing on it then. It was all.
They weren't probably playing on the section stuff, but they would have been playing, because there was a two cellos at one time, I think. So they were definitely part of it.
Was it Lewis Clark?
Lewis Clark, yeah, that's right, yeah.
So did he score it all out then? And
he would have scored it all out, and there was
conducted the musicians.
Yes. In fact, I was talking about that with somebody the other day. The fact that there were a lot of orchestral sections, and in those days, I don't know how public this should be, but the musicians basically, you could only do like 3 or 4 pieces in a 3-hour session, and because this was broken up, they deemed that they'd reached the limit of the number of pieces, and they were saying, no, these are just sections within songs. It's like a suite, and which did end up with some of the players in wearing with their coats ready to go at the end, playing in gloves, with gloves on the cellos. That was their way of saying we're not, we're a protest. So that was.
But that's what made him go off to Germany, wasn't it?
Well, yes, indeed. Yeah.
So I thought sub that for an attitude.
Yeah. That's just got the cultural, difference. Certainly in those days between like the orchestral session approach to recording, and then the sort of, the much more dispersed, disparate pop approach.
So how pissed was Jeff Lynne when he sang the vocal to "Can't Get You Out of My Head"?
I don't remember him being particularly.
Well, I just remember him mentioning it once in an interview. They used to have a drink and he did his vocals.
And
if you listen to that, bearing that in mind, he does sound a bit. It's a bit kind of.
Yeah, it's true.
It's funny if you had any memories of him drinking loads of whiskey in the studio.
No, but I dare say he may have done. It probably wouldn't necessarily have been that noteworthy at the time.
No, I suppose not. So as everyone did.
Yeah. I was impressed by him. He's very.
What was that documentary about him recently? Did you see it? He seems so down to earth, doesn't he?
He's very down to earth. A lot of these people are, Roy Wood's incredibly down to earth.
Yeah.
They don't need to have their airs and graces,
Absolutely. What was I going to ask you? So the Who you worked with, didn't you, on the Tommy?
I worked on the Tommy soundtrack. The film, and I remember that the Anne Margaret was in there, and I guess Oliver Reed must have come down.
Yeah.
And you definitely sensed that, a very big project going on. Very exciting.
Tina Turner, did you?
Tina Turner. I don't think she was in there. Yeah. But very dynamic music.
Yeah. Because I noticed all those Who albums, they got remixed, didn't they? All the ones that are currently on.
So that's right.
Mucked about with them.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think that's probably Pete just wanted to have a fiddle about.
Right.
Later on I did this, the first of we did a double album called Scoop.
Yes.
Because later on I was working out of Ill Pie, Broadwick Street, and we had this series of sessions where we went through all his old demo tapes from, started off in mono and ended up sort of 16 track.
Yeah.
And that was like, trawling through an artist's loft and fascinating.
Was it?
Going through, all.
Must be quite daunting, presumably. There's an enormous pile of stuff to go.
There was a lot of stuff to go through, and I guess we must have sifted, different formats, re-recorded them onto multi-track, and just sifting through, deciding what we wanted to use, and then bringing it all into line sonically. But it was fascinating, and also just hearing a lot of them quite fully formed at that demo stage, including sort of how the vocals went.
Yeah.
Things like Magic Bass. And,
Well, you get the impression he's quite studio savvy, isn't he, Pete Townshend?
Yeah,
he knows about the technology.
He's always been really early on, from the early 60s, when it was sort of much harder to be, to have a home kind of setup, and he was always into that. Yeah. So then he had all this my back pages. That was fascinating.
Yeah. So you were on the staff at his studio then, were you, for a time?
Well, when I left CTS, I kind of went freelance. So I've been freelance ever since then.
Right.
And I used to work down at Rockfield. Used to go and do bands down at Rockfield. And that was my first sort of experience with residential studios. And then I went to work out of Broadway Street. I was still sort of freelance, but I based myself there, which was a very happening place. We had the Face magazine downstairs and Empire Publishing upstairs, and right in town, and kind of worked with some interesting people there. Had Stephen Stills for a couple of days. Working on it was a couple of tracks.
Right.
So with John Cougar Mellencamp passed through, and I mixed. Generation X we had in just when Billy Idol was kind of going from that to being Billy Idol.
Right.
And Kate Bush and her brother Paddy Bush. So it was a little place, 16 track, the JBL 4311s, Neve, I think 1081 must have been 1081 board. And just a great sounding little room, and it was all up an iron staircase. It was like a very urban kind of situation, and stuff used to come in all the time, and it was great situation.
I suppose you never knew what was coming next.
And it I was there were people there taking the bookings, but I was kind of like opening up, locking up, and had to run the place.
How marvellous.
It was fun.
So did there come a point where you sort of had to bite the bullet and learn how to use Pro Tools and set yourself up with a system?
Well, I remember that we were down at Hook End in 2000 with Sade, and we were sort of installed for a few weeks, and I sort of had dabbled a little bit, but basically it was like that's what we were using. We weren't using multi-track,
right? And
so it's just a question of diving in. And I mean, the great thing about Pro Tools is that it is very intuitive, at least on the face of it. And you are able with a couple of pointers to just sort of dive in. It's there's something familiar about it. And then of course it's got all this depth. I think it's very well designed. And obviously now all these systems kind of converge because they all kind of take the best features. But in those days, I thought it was the first pro digital interface. I thought because there was a time, there was a while when everything kind of lurched backwards into sort of semi-pro world, and you had this, so you had like your MIDI workstations and then the audio, but it was all kind of a bit cobbled together. And these people had their Sony 3348s that cost 110 grand, sort of suddenly sitting gathering dust. And in the space of maybe like 18 months, it all turned around. Suddenly everyone they weren't being used anymore. And so it just kind of I had the time to kind of immerse myself in Pro Tools and the shortcuts.
Yes.
Yes. Someone said, "Oh, mice are vermin." So like a mouse is vermin. So because there's loads of shortcuts. And it is a great system. And now, of course, there's so many plugins, and it's it's really evolved, and it's sonically with the A to D, you can't really fault it. I mean, obviously you've then got the whole issue of summing and going through board, which is definitely gives certainly theoretically gives you a bit more, and certainly another dimension. And in the tape, I mean, I love recording to tape. We still kind of go through tape sometimes, and mixing to tape if you can. I was like 15 IPS, Dolby SR. You get a little bump around at 18 hertz, very warm. The tape does give you this kind of 3D-ness somehow. It's like just solidifies. I don't know how psychological this all is, but nowadays when nothing's ever quite finished because you can always tinker and tweak, it's hard to say, right, we're now going to put the mix down to tape, and this is it. You know, because if you do that, it's like, okay, now we want to change this and say, we have to put the stuff down to tape again. So, but it can also be done at the mastering stage. I remember once I did an album with this jazz guitarist, French guy called Marc Antoine, and we did it at his home studio, and it was all fine. He had a little Yamaha board, and it all sounded fine, but I wanted to sort of open it out a bit, and Ray Staff, I think he was still at CTS then, the CBS, Whitfield Street. We ran it onto tape, and you know, he was able to fiddle with the bias and azimuth, and really kind of, you know, did some magic and opened out all the top end, and, you know, and that was really, so it wasn't just going to tape, it was then tweaking with the parameters afterwards, and so there's like another, you know, there's a whole black arts world in there of manipulating.
Yeah, I think it's not a magic bullet though, is it? It's not like you just put it on tape and something better.
It's just an enhancer, you know. And now, you know, I mean, there are plugins like the Kramer thing, and then you've got the Studio 800. So you can get, you know, you can get pretty close to having those elements on board. Yeah.
So I heard you saying earlier you mix some stuff at home. Do you have a dedicated mixing room at home?
Well, it's not like a constructed mixing room, but I've got Pro Tools with this, like my Command 8 work surface control surface thing, which I don't know if we already covered this when we were rolling, but it was made by DigiDesign as it was then, and you can basically control all the parameters of the mix, including you know, riding plug-in parameters on faders, and so that's my board, if you like, and it's bankable, and so it's a kind of good sort of hybrid.
Right, and that's effectively you're working in the box.
And that's I'm kind of working in the box, you know, and I can sum out at the end if I want to. Using the AR18 speakers.
Wow.
We used to have down at the power plant.
AR18 LS?
Yeah, the LS, which still sound great. They just sound very true. I mean, they don't have the extended low end, but they were one of those speakers, a bit like the NS10s, which they preceded, where they were made as hi-fi speakers, and then suddenly people started using them in studios, and then they stopped making them. But so I still use them, and they have this natural, true sound. Because ideally, you want the speakers to be transparent. You don't want to really have to think about them. They just you just want to sort of eliminate them from the equation. So you just feel like what you're hearing is, you know, is in some sense true, and you know, and would translate to the outside world.
Yeah,
of course.
And a lot of the stuff you've done in recent years, in more of the sort of soul vein, has programmed drums presumably on it.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's always a mixture.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, have you ever got into drum programming or?
I mean, not seriously, but you know, I mean, there's always times when you need to replace, you know, kicks or snares or get, you know, extra loops and things. So you know, additional programming rather than that. Yeah, it's always nice to have someone that specialises in that, you know, and just be able to say, let's go, you know, just kind of direct it, and you know, it's kind of quite efficient use of time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, on this more recent Sade stuff that you've done, some of that is presumably programmed.
Oh yes,
So would that have been programmed before you even get to the studio?
Well, I mean, the thing about Sade, it's a band, it's not just her. So you know, typically the Andrew keyboard player and Stuart the guitarist, they will kind of come up with loops and beats and things, or just construct them on the fly. Yeah. And you know, and then if there's something that we pick up on, you know, we'll just go with that. So there'll be some things they bring into the studio prepared, and other things that just come up on the spot. And of course, because of the nature of being able to come up with loops and so on, songs tend to have their genesis like that. And then obviously afterwards you can then put, you know, drums on, and I mean, there's something about a live drummer, a good live drummer, as we've just had on this session, that really can bring tracks to life. You know, if that's kind of if that's the element you. And
with this session or with Sade, is there a sort of set couple of days of pre-production where you'll go into rehearsal room with them or something? Or
well, I mean, this session we thought we might start do pre-production on the tracks. They had some quite you know, well-developed demos, and I got the rhythm section down here, and we didn't bother with rehearsing. We just kind of went, because I thought if we rehearse 10 tracks and then we have to start, we had a kind of concise amount of time. I thought we should just start. You know, we rehearsed. We ran through. We'd given them, you know, the demos, the chord charts, so they were quite well prepared.
Yeah.
And they're all very experienced guys.
Right. So it's a bunch of hired hands, essentially.
A bunch of hired hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was Pete Lewinson, who's Charlie's live drummer. His brother Steve on bass. So you know, great DNA connection there. Paul Dunn, guitarist who I used to work for several years with this Japanese band Dreams Come True that I did several albums with. And Dave Tench, keyboard player, great keyboard player, who's played with Pete and Steve a lot. So I knew it was a good section.
Yeah.
You know, and when you've got the experience, they can just really dig into a track quickly. You know.
So what was the name of this artist? Atira.
Atira,
How do you spell that?
Atira.
Okay.
It's like her stage name.
I see.
And
but she's really called Madge.
She's very cool. Really called Mel, actually.
All right, that was close.
Melissa, yeah. And she made one album before, which is more sort of like laid back soul, and this is more kind of direct and soulful, rock tinged.
Right. And is this for a label?
This is an independent production.
Yeah.
And she and her musical cohort, they've come over here to you know, try and make inroads, and it's quite an impressive you know, punt. But she's striking looking.
Yeah.
Got a good voice.
Right.
And the songs are good. So she's, you know, got really bubbly personality. So they've got all the ingredients.
Yeah.
You know. So it'll be an interesting exercise in how far you can take that and you know, get through in the current climate. But you do see it though. You see Florence and the Machines and Adele's, and especially in this country.
Yeah.
It's small enough so you know, you kind of read about people, and then you hear something on the radio, and it's, oh, that's the person that I, you know, and then suddenly if they've got the chops,
it's a tipping point, isn't it?
Suddenly they can break through.
Yeah.
But I always say that in order to be successful, you don't actually have to reach the whole of the public doesn't have to buy into you. It's, you know, even the most successful artists, you're only talking about a few million in say in the UK. More people watch Coronation Street every week or go to football at the weekend. So you haven't got to convince everybody. You've just got to convince a section of the population. You know. So if you look at it like that, you know, if you've got talent, something that is going to connect with a body of people, you can get through. And you know, I mean, like for me, music's a lot about emotion, and if you've got music that is conveying some kind of emotion, then you are bound to connect with some people. As long as you can get heard above everybody else, that's the thing these days. You've got a lot of competition.
Yeah. And do you have any advice about how to punt your work out there?
No, I just think you've got to have the raw materials to start with. You've got to have the drive. And
I guess that's your specialised subject, isn't it? Is doing that.
It's. I like to work with artists they know what they're about. They've got the talent, and just kind of really bringing the best out of them and making them, putting them in an environment where they feel they can create and be productive, rather than creating someone from the ground up. You know, other people do that. You know, I'd rather take someone that's got the talent and the drive and help them run with it. Really, help them make the record they'd like to make, because at the end of the day, they've got to front it. You know, they've got to go out and say, "This is me. I've got to do that."
So you work residentially quite a lot.
Well, from time to time, yeah.
Don't you like being at home?
Especially, I like being at home too. Yeah, no, I do. Well, I think, as we were saying before, if you come to a place like Real World, you're cut off from the daily life. You haven't got any distractions, and you can really focus on, you know, recording and being creative. So I mean, that's a great scenario really to set up. It's like a creative crucible. And you know, you can just devote the time to being creative, and with meals laid on hospitality. So it's like a musical retreat in a way, you know.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
It's, you know, it's a good way to work if you want to be productive, and it's quite inspirational. I mean, I know the guys that played on the session loved it. They loved playing together. They loved all being in the one place. Yeah. You know, and certainly Atira, she's very inspired by being here.
So you don't mind travelling the world and being away from home for long periods at a time?
It's kind of part of the gig, you know. I mean, with Sade, she was always a fan of that idea of removing yourself and concentrating. You know, we were a couple of months in Compass Point back in the 80s, and that was wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wanted to leave. And that was an old, I think it was an MCI desk. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounded good.
They sound great.
Yeah.
Mike and I love MCI desks.
Yes.
Love them.
Yes. Yeah. And then we were down at Miraval.
Right.
Again for a couple of stretches. You know, SSL, big concrete bar with a room. So that was that was good fun. And you know, and Hook End and latterly here at Miraval. You know. So I was going to say something else about.
Well, I suppose if you've got the budget to do it, then it's.
If you've got the budget to do it, yes. But I mean, even somewhere like here now, it's quite economical in terms of putting everybody up, feeding. You know, so it's kind of an all-in kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
But it means you get fed as well.
You get fed as well. You haven't got to think about anything. You know. But I mean, talking of working away from home, in fact, you know, you tend to be working at home more these days because you can.
Yeah.
Technologically, you've got the same platform. As we know, it's had such an impact on studios. But it does mean that you can work at home, even if it's just on part of a project. But I mean, I've mixed quite a few things at home. And obviously that's a different discipline, because then you have got all the distractions, you know.
But then don't you think it's quite good to have breaks when you're mixing, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. And you can sort of dip in and out any time, day or night, come do a bit, stop, change a light bulb, you know, make some baked beans. So it's a whole other dimension, really.
Yeah.
Doesn't help the studio as much, but it makes sense, you know, to the if you're working on the music. It makes sense.
So Sade live mix thing that you did. How much of that is actually live on stage, and how much of it is because there's some loops and things going on, aren't there?
Well, there's loops and things. Yeah, I mean there are things running.
Yeah.
I mean that's sort of standard.
Right.
Stage,
is there anything? Are there any guitars live or?
I think it's all the guitar stuff's pretty live. Yeah.
Is it right?
Yeah. It was only like maybe extra drum loop type things.
Okay. So most of the keyboards and guitars.
Most of the keyboards and guitars. I guess like effects type stuff was running off. You know. But most of that was live.
Oh right. And how much of it is repaired afterwards?
Hardly anything. Only if there's instrument wise, if there's just the odd fluff. And we had tapes from some sessions from other nights as well, so we were able to sort of dip in.
Yeah.
And vocally, just if there was any feedback or weirdness, again I was able to just pinch the odd thing from other nights.
But that's pretty much her vocals, is it?
Yeah.
And they're not tuned with auto-tune or something?
No auto-tuning, no. And we didn't re-record anything, as I say, because we always had the option of the other night. I think we added some audience singing along on some, because the gig was recorded in LA,
right?
Ontario in LA. And I think we added some audience from a concert in Rio,
right?
Where they were singing along more, where they were going, "Your love is king," which is quite sweet. So we did a bit of that, just because you work with what you've got. I mean, you've got and filming wise as well. I think they did do some extra shots on a couple of other nights, and so I think there were a couple of times when we had to use the bits from another night.
Right.
Because so it was sync with the film.
Yeah.
Which actually was, then caused its own problems because we had to the spill particularly was different.
Right.
So there were technical issues like that.
Because it's a very polished. I watched the first song on YouTube. You can see the intro and the credits and everything, and the band all rise up through the floor.
Right.
And
it's a fantastically.
It looks completely it's so polished and staged. You just I don't know. I was immediately suspicious.
Yeah. No, it does. I mean, visually, it's a fantastic concept.
Yeah.
Sophie Muller was the director, and I forget the name of the guy that put the staging together. But they had this idea of blank stage. HD screen behind and projecting this fantastic projection. Yeah. And I mean, when I saw that for the first time, because we went down to Nice for the end of the rehearsals and the first night, it was very emotional because I just thought this was like the real sort of fruition of her career, coming of age, true coming of age as an artist, and visually it looked fantastic and it sounded great. And I said, you've got to do a DVD of this, and unfortunately it did happen, and it is great. It's really impressive. Yeah, the whole thing.
Well, the first song looks amazing.
Yes, no, it's worth seeing.
Yeah, and there's a 5.1 mix obviously. So how was that done? Was that
yes? I mean, in fact, I mixed the stereo at home,
right?
And so a lot going on with monitors and everything. And then we came here to do the 5.1, and essentially I just split it out.
Yeah.
A bit,
So it's based on your
based on
in-the-box
my
mix.
based on the in the box mix, and then we split it out and pan the audience around some of the reverbs, and we had a few things moving about, not much.
Because there's a lot more tracks on the DVD than there are on the album, aren't there?
I think the album was just an afterthought. I think it was the label that wanted to have the CD of that. Yeah. I think that was more like tagged on because somebody wanted to have a standalone CD. So that's really just sort of an extra.
Yeah. So you did the stereo mixes essentially for the stereo soundtrack on
the DVD. Yeah, and then they just took whatever they wanted to take for the CD.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Right. So were you working to picture at home as well then?
I was. Yeah.
Powerful enough computer to be able to have
I had a
quick
separate monitor. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I remember we did have some problems with the format of the video. It was causing them, the RAM to fill up. Memory. There's a term for that.
Buffering.
Buffering. Yeah.
Presumably.
Yeah.
Well, presumably it's all in HD.
It's all in HD,
extremely
but it was to do with the format that they were presenting, that they were passing the video onto me.
Yeah.
And eventually we found out the format that I can tell you what that was. I can look it up at home. And that did trip us up, and nobody knew. Nobody, there was a lot of head scratching until somebody said, "Oh, I think maybe we should give you the video in this format." And I was like, "Oh, no, it all works."
So when you've done the recent Sade stuff, how does that differ from the earlier stuff? Apart from the fact you're doing Pro Tools, apart from on tape.
Well, yeah, I mean that is a big difference, of course, because the early stuff was all live in the studio, drums, everything. I mean, in a way, each album is kind of a technological snapshot. When you went through, having things on cassettes, ideas, and then rough mixes on cassettes. And then it was DATs and CDs. And now it's memory sticks.
Right. But I bet it doesn't make the process any quicker, does it?
It doesn't make it any quicker. No. In fact, in a way, it's like it's more concise when it has to be live.
You've got to get it right. There's no fanning about.
No. So now obviously you can tinker to your heart's content. So obviously it means you've got more vocabulary, more sonic vocabulary, a bigger palette.
And does that make it a better record?
Well, it makes it a different kind of record. I mean, the technology has made music move in different directions. There's no doubt about it. I mean, and there's obviously good, the dance, the rap, all that kind of thing wouldn't have come about without the technology. But I kind of think that, interestingly, just before MIDI came in was when sort of interplay between musicians was at its height. You had the Earth, Wind and Fire, the Fat Back bands, and those guys. You had to play. You had to, and that kind of musical interaction. That's what the technology has made disappear. These days, the mindset is not really about the musical interplay. So you hear a lot of tracks with you've got the drums, you've got the vocal, everything else is just sort of a bit of a wash behind. It's not really doing anything very much. You can't really tell what it is. Whereas like back in the day, it was all about the musical interaction. When you think about the Who and Santana and the Stones, for that matter, all those kind of bands, it was all about the playing together. So the technology, once it meant that you didn't have to do that, a lot of that has changed in the mindset of like modern young musicians.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed has changed that I don't know how you view this, but when I was sort of sitting down listening to some of the things you've done, I noticed things like Maxwell and Sade. They sort of sound like they've got the loudness curve, and there's like some nice trebly stuff going on, some nice low bottom end. Not much interesting in the 1K area. And then I stuck on Joe Boxers, which I believe you're involved with.
Yes.
And it's like no bottom end at all. Loads of middle.
Well, that's partly. It's certainly Sade and Maxwell. They do like the low end. And you've got the sort of the midges, like the pads and the guitars.
But it's certainly less pronounced than other genres of music as well. So if you listen to a rock album, there's going to be a bit more of that.
That's true.
Whereas it's all a bit. It's like. It blends nicely into the background a bit. It doesn't not too offensive on the ear.
Well, I suppose that's just a part of the content of the music. But I always like to think you kind of get that sort of 3Dness, that sort of depth. So kind of draws you in, draws the listener rather than hitting over the head.
Yeah.
It sort of draws you in. But it depends on the music as well,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I mean, I recently did some tweets, some mixes for a sort of young indie band where like the vocals are all reverby and buried, and that's a different sort of sound. And you know, different strokes for different folks. I mean, and the thing of like working, you know, for a long time around studios is that, you know, you might become known for one kind of thing, but because of whatever might become successful, you tend to get a bit pigeonholed. But you know, over years you've worked on everything. You know, I remember working on Misty and Roots, regular, you know, dub band on the 8-track in Hayes, you know, and that's great too. You know, folk stuff and you know, all kinds. So I guess the thing about, you know, Sade or Maxwell, that's their sound. You know, you work with what people like as well, but, you know, and different strokes for different folks.
So what do you like if you have a week off and you can listen to some music? What do you listen to?
Well, no, I mean, I still like bands like Little Feat, and you know, I mean, I kind of like what you might broadly call roots music of all areas. You know, I don't like sort of the tightly constructed pop stuff too much. I mean, it's interesting, bells and whistles, kind of interesting, tickle the ear, and in different, you know, fads and fashions sonically. That's always interesting. But you know, in terms of like music with some depth that you might keep going back to, you know, in a way, the older stuff. Well, there's a lot of, you know, newer stuff that people are still very creative. You know.
I mean, I think I'm astonished by how many old records there are still yet to discover.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, do you think there's enough recorded music already? Maybe
there is enough.
Should we stop?
There is enough. You know, and there's enough songs have been written and so on. And it's amazing actually that people still come up with new stuff, and that people are still interested in it. I mean, I know we say the music business has gone, you know, been in decline for as long as sort of anyone can remember, but it's still here, and there's still a big appetite for music, and you know, people are still creative, and people want to hear new stuff all the time. You know.
Do you own lots of gear, and do you get inspired by buying a new microphone? And is that something that tickles you?
I don't own tons of gear. I've got a few mics and preamps and so on, but I haven't really gone down that route. I've had a couple of sort of white elephants in my time, like emulator 2s and things like that. Yeah. So I got a few really, you know, I got a Quantec and a couple of the PCM 70 and some of those kind of things. You know, the old drum machines. I can't remember what it is now. It's an old Roland CompuRhythm thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, things like that.
Yeah, I got
you know,
CR68 or CR78.
Yes, 78 I think it is. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
That's on loads of good records.
But, yes, absolutely. Sly Stone, Family Affair, and all that. But I haven't gone too much down that route of, you know, like old mics and things like that.
No.
Because, I don't know why really. But I just like to have you know, an efficient sort of platform, if you like, to work from, and then you can always rent in what you like. But it's, you know, I'm always interested in gear, you know, studio porn, as we say.
Absolutely.
You know, and we've got some great mics here, like C12s.
I'm sure, I suppose.
67.
If you're working in places like this, there's plenty of stuff to play with, I suppose.
So that's a nice thing. Sorry.
No, carry on, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, there's always a nice thing about being in a studio is if you've got the equipment that they've amassed to take advantage of. And always, you know, being in a studio, you run into people, you know, it's kind of, it's always nice. It feels like this is the true environment to be in. You know, it's fine working at home. Yeah. But it's, you know, that's fine. You know, I'm always pleased to hear that studios are doing well. You know, the ones that are still around. Yeah. It's important, I think, too. And artists still like to, sooner or later, they like to go into the studio. You know.
So when you're mixing home, what are your monitors you're listening on then? Are you NS10s and?
I've got the ARs.
Oh, of course, you've got the AR-18s.
Yes.
So is it just those then?
Got some Oratones.
Oh right, okay.
And then just kind of like memory stick, you know, radios and things around the house, boom boxes. And taking it around different rooms. You know.
So you listen on lots of different systems.
Listen on different systems, you know, headphones, and I think because it has to translate into. You hear music everywhere, you know, like you hear music from the next room very often, and that's a good test of balance, you know. And then you hear music, I always say that, my joke is that you hear music in a restaurant and it's something you've worked on and it's really quiet and muffled, and you sort of go, I think the hi-hat's loud. So it does have to translate in the car and as well, and to anywhere really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about this LA Noir game music recording then.
Yes.
That was the chap in the Sade band.
Well, that was Andrew Hale. Yes. Yeah. He was involved in that with this guy called Brendan. I don't know his last name. He was at Sony, and then set up by himself. Well, independently. He's Australian, and they spent about 5 years working on this game because they wanted it to be real cutting edge, especially for, technically visually. And Andrew was doing the music, and there was some orchestral music and jazz. Sort of, I think there was about a 7-piece jazz section, and so we recorded the jazz pieces. They were longer pieces and like incidental strings. That was Metropolis. And then the orchestral stuff they recorded at Abbey Road, and then I did some mixing of that at his place. And
well,
of course,
I was going to say, are there any particular challenges that would have been different from if you were just making a record? Or
well, I suppose the thing is that you don't know how it's going to be used in the end, and obviously they would then layer it up with sound effects and dialogue, and you didn't know if it was going to be standalone parts of this game, where you have the sort of like live footage, or if they were just going to use it in beds, So I think that the thing was, we kind of were a bit flexible about what we presented to them.
Right.
We presented the the mixes and then the stems. I think we just stemmed it out so they were able to use what they wanted.
Were there like particular timings and things you had to stick to, or any kind of?
I think there were. No, it wasn't. We weren't really trying to fit in around things that already existed.
No.
I think it was.
They just wanted some nice pieces.
They wanted nice pieces of music, and I guess that they then had timing things too. But so we didn't really have to work to picture in that way. No, because they were still developing all that while we were doing the music.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It must be quite a budget then for doing it.
Well, I think there must have been. I mean, you're paying for all those man hours in front of computers and all that technology, but there's definitely budgets in that world still. Yeah, because it's you notice on go to the cinema, a lot of the adverts for the games, or TV, peak time TV, and a lot of films tend to look more like games. Some of the ones aimed at like the teen market, they look more like games. So there's definitely a thriving part of it.
I suppose
thriving media. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about Boz Scaggs as well.
Boz
He
Scaggs,
did that album a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Speak Low. He wanted to do. He'd done one before, a sort of jazz standards album.
Yeah.
And he'd always wanted to work with me, so we went. He's got his own setup in San Francisco called MIAC, and he's very into sort of high end audio.
Right.
But we did the. He got an arranger, piano player called Gil Goldstein, and he coordinated the musical side of things, and we recorded. We spent a few days at Skywalker Sound in the hills outside San Francisco, which is a fantastic facility. It's just like this vast hangar of a room, but you've got the big movable screens on the walls and the ceiling, and big control room, SSL K series, I believe, and so we set up in there.
So is it pretty much recording them as a live band?
It was pretty much recording it as a live band, yeah. I can't remember who the lineup, but I mean it was an interesting lineup.
Yeah, I mean it's very polished sounding record, isn't it?
Yeah, and so we recorded there at Skywalker, and then brought it back to his place, and then carried on. He did his vocals obviously, and then sort of carried on massaging the record, and so that was like sort of more off the beaten track.
So did you do the vocals with him then? Or
so I did, yes. I seem to remember doing a lot of the vocals with him. Yeah.
Does there any auto tune on that? Because it's sort of when I put it on, I thought, is there a bit of auto tune going? I don't know. If that was my imagination, or just maybe it just sounds like that. I don't know.
Not that I remember.
I
think in the end I didn't finish off the mixing. For that, but
so somebody might have had a fiddle.
Yeah, but on the whole, it was. No, he's very very proficient.
Yeah.
Vocals, guitar.
Yeah.
He's like you might imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of those people like it's when you're sitting in front of him and he's performing, you're going, "Oh, I'm in the same room and Boz Scaggs is singing," which I've had before with Boy George or Tracy Thorn from Everything That Will Go, or Sade and Maxwell for that matter.
Yeah.
You sort of, it's still a buzz to be, to have someone performing like that in front of you.
Yeah.
And thinking, that's a great take. That's exciting.
It is. Yeah. And Maxwell, I don't recall hearing much about him in recent years in this country. Is he hugely successful elsewhere?
Yes, he's still big in the States.
Right.
Yeah, you don't hear so much of him here. I agree. Because he hasn't. Well, he did tour here a couple of years ago. I think he played a couple of nights. Hammersmith, I think.
Right. I'm sure there is a following.
Yes, there is a following, but
it was a big explosion when he first came out. It was like the new big thing.
Yes,
and then it kind of just died down gradually. And I didn't realise he was still even making records.
He does still make records, and I think he's a fantastic talent. He's a great live performer. He's just a natural in a sort of Marvin Gaye mould. Yeah. And yes, he sort of has a precocious talent, really.
It definitely sounded, the track I was listening to definitely sounded a bit Prince as well. There was definitely
Prince,
that kind of going
there was a Prince, Marvin Gaye, and I think he just sort of likes to do other things. He's not like only driven by the music, so he just likes to go off and sort of live his life, and as does Sade, in fact. So his music is a big element in their life, but it's not the only thing in their
I suppose if you have that level of success, you can afford to do what you like.
Yes, I mean, I'd like Maxwell to perform more. I think he's fantastic. And so he and like Sade, they don't really want to make formula records. They want to make more individual records. And so, however long it takes them, fine. It's, they're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Maxwell has a musical sidekick called Hod David, and so they generate lots of stuff between them, and they just tinker around on it. So he's still going. Yes.
Yeah. And do you get a lot of calls from labels wanting you to mix stuff that's already recorded?
I do sometimes.
Yeah.
And as long as I have some sort of affinity with the music, I'm happy to take it on.
Yeah. Why do you think they call you? Is it because they like something you've done previously in particular?
Inevitably, I think it's because of that, and that's what I mean. You do kind of get a bit pigeonholed, so you do tend to get the things that sound like Sade or the things that sound like Maxwell. It's inevitable. It's like a shorthand for how people operate, really.
Yeah.
So, but they get other things. I mean, because then you've also got people you met over the years and or worked for over the years, and so people get in touch with you from all different angles, or sometimes people you haven't heard from for years, and suddenly pop up. So.
And do you still make money out of royalties from recent albums, or is it all a fee-based sort of situation these days?
And most albums these days don't recoup.
No.
But then occasionally, they might suddenly find a use, outside of the main record release, and then beyond that, it's just a sort of little reduces to a little trickle in the end.
Yeah.
But it's still. I suppose the financially the music business is not what it was. Budgets are not what they were. Price of records is not what it was, and definitely shot itself in the foot in a way by not foreseeing the download revolution. But if you look at it from the now, there's
That's right. Just throwing my piece of paper over the floor.
The single market, as it were, single market is really on booming because of all the downloads. So, and so they have found ways to. It's surprising that people still buy anything if you can get it for free.
Yeah.
But, I think there is a way to monetize from downloading and from streaming too. And obviously the interested parties have all been hard at work in making that happen. And the music business, in a way, the world followed the music business. The music business sort of went on decline first and had to adapt their mentality, and then the world mentality has happened. The same things happened, and I think it's bottomed out with the music business. I think it's become a way. You can see the way forward with downloading and so on, and of course the live things become more prominent and lucrative for artists, and. So we hope it seems that people will continue to have some kind of like livelihood from music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there seems to be plenty of young people still wanting to do it.
They do. Well, I mean, there are plenty of young people that still want, because then you have the issue with, you've got the courses and the graduates from the courses. And like in many fields, I guess you could argue there are too many graduates chasing too few positions. But so at least you can have that training and that sound technical basis. And then it's up to you really to try and make your place in the musical world.
Well, there's also, there's lots of young bands and musicians wanting to make records.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then so therefore, and of course, it's much easier to do that now on your own back, and then to publish your work and just get it out there. Again, whether you can be heard is another matter, but you can certainly get out there.
What do you say to young bands and musicians that whether maybe you work with them and they say, well, what should we do with our song now? How do we get famous?
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Well, I think you've got to really want to be out there. Look at me. And well, if it's a band, in a way, it's a little bit easier because you can just go out and do gigs. There's always something to perform. I think it's harder if you're like a solo artist, singer-songwriter. And just, I think you've got to work these days on your self-promotion. You've got to have the website, Facebook, the social networking all together. And usually, if it's a young band, they're on that anyway. It's kind of part of their world. So if you do have any kind of following, you just kind of got to build that up.
Yeah.
And then, there's a lot. And if your stuff is good enough or can connect with enough people, then you'll probably find a level where you can function. And then, it's like sink or swim, really.
Yeah. How was it working with Was Not Was?
Well, that was a sort of brief thing. I worked with Don. Don was, he was producing this band called Brother Beyond, which is kind of like a kind of a boy band. There was more to it than it wasn't like a manufactured type boy band. And so he produced a few of the tracks with them, and I was engineering for him. Right. And then he went off, and then I produced some more of the tracks. Then I did a little bit just a few days with him and Dave, his sidekick, working on a couple of the tracks for that. I think it was the What Up Dog album. Well, I'd always loved what Was Not Was. I mean, the dance stuff, and then the Squeaks Out Come the Freaks. I always thought it was really interesting. So I was just very excited to have the opportunity to work with him.
And what was it like in the studio then? Were they as balmy as they come across?
No, not really. I think they got that sort of that's the wacky side. They've definitely got the wacky side, but he's a real muso, and he's a good personality though. He's he's sort of quietly just makes everything comfortable, and he's not a drama guy. He just sort of.
Well, you seem the same. You seem pretty laid back. Is that what you'd say you're best at? Is kind of keeping things calm and.
I get just kind of you want to be enthusiastic, obviously. Yeah. But I guess I don't sort of have too many meltdowns, and I've got stamina, which I think is an important ingredient for anything to do with making music. And it's just, I mean, maybe calm in the sense of, kind of knowing when to be diplomatic, and sometimes you want the dramas can happen between the musicians, the band members themselves, and you don't necessarily have to get involved. I wouldn't say I like to instigate dramas. I mean, there is that school of sort of like you get people really amped up and vibed up, and I kind of, I mean, it's different strokes for different folks, I just, it's an enjoyable thing to do. I don't get too stressed about it. If you're working with good people, then it kind of everything has a flow to it.
Have you got any top secret tips or tricks that you can impart to our?
I probably have, but I couldn't possibly tell you.
You have to shoot me.
Yes, I have to shoot first. Yeah. One interesting thing, I suppose, is that if you ever need to be micro-editing vocals, that consonants don't have a pitch. So if you ever need to borrow an s or a t from somewhere, you can just take one from somewhere else. You can just slot it in as long as it's the right length to any vocal, because it doesn't have a pitch. So that's quite an interesting one.
So you get quite fiddly in Pro Tools then?
Only if you need to get fiddly, you can. I think that's the thing, stuff like pops and click, So if you need to, you can. Automating EQ, vocal EQs. I mean, automating vocal EQs I think is a good tip, especially if things are pieced together, and using compression instead of volume changes, and different kinds of compression have different characteristics. So I think, you know, using compression to achieve level, you know, level matching or in fact sonic, you know, sonic tweaking, I think is maybe an undervalued art. Yeah.
Do you vary the compression then, and you automate that?
Yeah, because if the vocal's dynamic, then you kind of you need to vary, you know, the compression. Use more. I mean, generally use more than one compressor. You know, you want to have one that digs in more and bites, and another one a gentler one. You know, and the LA2A is always find it very tolerant, or an LA2A plug-in. I mean, now everyone's got access to a version of classic studio gear, and while, you know, you could argue that it wouldn't be as good as the one you might have in front of you, the $10,000 Fairchild or whatever, nevertheless you can have 20 instances of it, and you can't argue with that. You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.